Richard Linklater is back. And I know, look, he never went anywhere, but I didn't see the animated film he dropped last year, and I never got around to seeing Where'd You Go, Bernadette. So, the last Linklater joint that I had the pleasure of viewing was Last Flag Flying, which was fine. It was a little forgettable, but fine. I've always been a fan of Linklater's, but this was his first film since Boyhood that really stuck with me. Like, subscribe, comment, and tell a friend if you haven't. And if you're new here, check out the rest of the channel and let me know what you think. Let's dive into Hitman. I love this movie, full stop. It's just such a good time, from the performances to the awkward situational humor of the circumstances that Gary puts himself in, to the absolutely electric chemistry between Glenn Powell and Adria Arjona. I had a blast with this film, and I've got to say, I was decently surprised. As I stated up top, I've always liked Linklater, but admittedly, he's a director that has always been hit or miss with me. Dazed and Confused is a classic. I don't think anyone would argue otherwise. School of Rock is a staple of any late 90s, early 2000s kid's childhood. I know not a ton of people saw Bernie, but I thought that movie was a sleeper hit. And then there's Boyhood, a movie that has had a significant impact on me not only because of the revolutionary style in which it was filmed, but because its themes were so relevant to me and my own personal experience going through my parents' divorce at a complicated age. That being said, there are quite a few films in his filmography that I would designate as just decent or downright forgettable. When Hitman was announced, I really didn't know what to expect, especially considering that while Powell has sort of become a popular get in Hollywood as of late, he's never really struck me as someone with the capability of a leading man. Don't get me wrong, I've always enjoyed Glenn Powell, but he's always sort of played the same archetype in every movie he's in, the cocky, handsome smartass. And I'm happy to report that him and Linklater both proved me wrong. Powell absolutely owns this movie. Now, from a negative perspective, I will admit that Hitman can be quite predictable. And I don't think it's as nuanced in terms of its analysis of the human psyche and the nature of our reality as it thinks it is. Powell's character, Gary Johnson, is a professor of psychology who masquerades part-time for the New Orleans Police Department as a hitman for hire, who puts his clients in precarious situations where he is able to draw confessions out of them. Now, this story and the story of the other characters play out with portions of the film being dedicated to his university lectures on the psychology of humans and our interaction with the reality that we all exist in, and how this affects the choices we make. I think this was an interesting approach, but all of those scenes are just sort of surface level. And sure, they add a bit more flavor to the film, but quite honestly, the majority of them could have been omitted, and the basic essence of this movie would have remained intact. With those two minor speed bumps out of the way, I found the rest of the film to be a delight. Powell takes his gig with the police department seriously after being tossed into this role by happenstance. It's so much fun watching him create these overly elaborate personalities and disguises for different assassin personas. And Powell really got his first opportunity to display the range of the talent he possesses, and it was so refreshing. It's even pretty impressive how easily Powell pulls off his main role as Professor Gary Johnson, a sort of simple, reclusive, goofy intellectual who enjoys the simple comfort of his books and the company of his two cats. We all know Powell has become kind of like the new Hollywood pretty boy, a la Brad Pitt in his early years. So it's hard to think that he could convincingly ditch that facade and become this type of character, but he did, and he did it well. I cannot give him enough praise for this role. Now, I wasn't as familiar with Arjona as I was Powell before this movie, but she was equally as fantastic. Arjona portrays a desperate, emotionally abused housewife who seeks out Johnson's persona Ron to kill her husband. After convincing her against this notion, her and Ron commence a secretive relationship and eventually fall in love. I know, like I said, predictable, and honestly, I don't think this movie would have worked without Arjona. The chemistry between these two characters, especially from her side, is ridiculous. Probably the most convincing that I've seen from a rom-com in years. It was incredibly well executed and so believable. And honestly, that's the best aspect of this movie. The narrative of this movie was drawn from true events based on the real Gary Johnson. Inherently interesting, but from what I understand, nothing he ever experienced played out as cinematically and dramatically as they did in this film. This story lives and dies by Powell and Arjona's interactions and romance with each other. Hitman isn't a groundbreaking piece of art like Linklater's Boyhood, but it is his most enjoyable outing in some time. It's not a movie that's trying to make a statement or portray a complicated theme or message. It's just a fun foray into the world of a man discovering himself and his romance that turns his life upside down. It's a tale as old as time, but it's done right. It's a great summer flick that I highly recommend. And this movie may just make Powell an A-list star, and I wouldn't be upset. The guy has got talent. And I will be the first to say that I was wrong.